I'm Jim Gordon, and it's my pleasure to be back here in the studio at the Richmond Sentinel office here in Richmond. I'm back again this year to host a special segment on the upcoming federal election. The city of Richmond is divided into two ridings, Richmond Centre and the Steveston Richmond East, resulting in sending two members of Parliament to Ottawa. Now, we have invited all 10 candidates and offer this as a platform, as a stage, to let you see and hear these candidates, who they are, and why they want to go to Ottawa as a member of Parliament. Every candidate that accepted our invitation will be given the same questions: why they're running, and what they see as the most important issues facing the residents of Richmond. Let's get right to this new federal election and the candidates right here at the Richmond Sentinel. Well, our first guest, he is rerunning, is Kenny CHIU. He represents the Conservative Party in Steveston Richmond East riding. Kenny, before we get to that, we want to make an announcement. I should have mentioned it right off the bat, though, that everybody has been wearing masks. We have taken them off just for the interview. We are doing our best to stay as far apart, but just so you know, masks are being worn by our crew behind the cameras. We'll put ours back on as soon as the interviews are over. Okay, Kenny, you're up first. Let's talk a bit about who you are. That's your first question, and we'll go from there.
Jim, I'm Kenny CHIU. I've been a Richmond resident for decades. I first moved from Saskatoon to Richmond in 1992. This is where my family is rooted. My two girls went to McRoberts. The younger one has just graduated from McRoberts last year during pandemic, but they are both in university. My wife and I both work in Richmond. I love the city. I love its vibrance and active and diversity in our city here. So this is where my home is, and I want to continue to serve it.
I guess with my second question, as we mentioned off the top, everyone will be getting the same three questions. With you, it's a bit of a switch on that because you're rerunning. You're the current MP. Talk a bit about the job that you know you have to do because you have been there and you're rerunning, and why you want to continue doing this job.
Well, Jim, yes, I do, but no, I don't. Because 2 months after I sworn in as the Member of Parliament for Steveston Richmond East, there's this announcement in World Health Organization called COVID pandemic.
Yes.
And the world has never been the same ever. And so how does it, how is it to be an MP in the normal days?
You don't know.
I don't know.
You don't, okay.
I don't know. But on the other hand, though, I find it a privilege to be able to represent the good people of Steveston Richmond East during this, historical moment in our country's history. We have never encountered such a pandemic in that same scale, with impacts on our healthcare, people's lives, our economy, ever. And having a seat in the House of Commons, arguing and advocating for Richmond, it's such a privilege. And yet, on the other hand, though, it's also a burden that I've been taking on. That not being in the government side, sometimes it's difficult to implement some of the ideas and changes that is much needed and beneficial to Richmondites here in my riding.
Let's talk a bit about what you feel is most important. I mean, you really pegged it with COVID. That really has taken up most of the space and the focus and the concentration, as it should. And we certainly can't say that we're seeing a light yet, cynical as that may sound. But let's talk a bit about issues. Issues still have to be dealt with no matter what is happening. What have you been looking at, and what do you feel is the most urgent and needs attention from government?
I think during this pandemic, it exposed our country to polarization of opinion, even on the effectiveness of masking.
Certainly, yeah.
Vaccination. By the way, I have received 2 shots of the same vaccines. I encourage any Richmondites who are still not vaccinated to seek vaccination as much as possible. We believe in the evidence that we have received, the science that presented to us, and the data that have shown to policymakers that it is the best, most effective tools for Canada to be in a recovery mode, and it relies on each citizen to do our part. So on that, I've gone door knocking, and there have been a lot of citizens who are still hesitant.
Sure.
Some of them are in fear. They're not comfortable. And conservatives believe that Canadians do enjoy our universal health care. We enjoy our safety. We enjoy our health status in the world. Over 70% of our citizens have been vaccinated. But at the same time, we are not the country that would drag people to a clinic and get vaccinated. So, how do we as a government, Aaron O'Toole Conservatives, how do we articulate this? We urge everybody. We want to encourage and recommend vaccination as the most effective one, and at the same time, respecting people's final choice on how they will receive vaccination. It's also another dynamics, during this election. And then there's also hates and misinformation, discrimination. We know that throughout this pandemic, a lot of the citizens have actually gone through and encountered that level of hate.
Yeah, certainly.
In fact, I personally am seeing something similar right now being circulated in some of the social media, attacking me as anti-Chinese, myself, and my party as anti-China. Everybody knows that that's farthest from the truth. Ever since the very first member of parliament of Chinese descent, Doug Jiang, had become a conservative MP in Vancouver Centre, this party has been paying attention and be fighting for equality and counter the kind of level of discrimination that we are seeing. But it's disheartening as well to see that there are opportunists trying to take advantage of the COVID-19 pandemic situations. Many people are isolated, and even in the sense of information-wise, they're isolated, and therefore some people are taking a full advantage of that. Certainly. For their political gains. So there are these issues that, as the Member of Parliament, I want to do more to encourage everybody to be kind, to appreciate what Canada has as an opportunity. As a Conservative MP, I'm also very concerned about where this country is heading. Jim, we have conducted this interview for maybe a few minutes now, but every second of those minutes, every second, the country has overspent so much that every second we borrow $50,000. That's how much Canada has overspent. Right. And these monies, $424 million per day and $154 billions for the year, have to be accounted for, have to be paid for sometimes. Right now we are running on our grandkids' credit cards. It's not fair, it's not right. So how do we recover from that? Aaron O'Toole Conservative, we have a proposal how we can actually present to Canadians a plan of recovery for Canada in our economic situations, in our mental health care, in our jobs recovery, how to support Canada so that the next pandemic hit us, we would not be found that our cupboards are empty again. So all these ideas we're presenting to Canadians as a positive message to lead Canada out of a COVID-19 pandemic situation.
It's Kenny Chiu. Thank you for joining us today, Kenny. I know schedules are busy right now as we get closer to the election. Kenny is the current Conservative MP for Steveston, Richmond East. He's rerunning. He's our first guest. Kenny Chiu, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Jim.
Well, joining us now is PARM BAINS. He is the Liberal representative running for MP in the Steveston, Richmond East riding. PARM, welcome.
Thank you.
As we're doing with everybody, PARM, we're asking three questions, all the same. First one for you is, let's tell our viewers a bit about yourself, and we'll go from there.
Well, my name's PARM BAINS. I'm a lifelong Richmond resident. Grew up in the Shelmont area my whole life. I teach in Richmond. I'm a university lecturer now at Kwantlen Polytechnic University. I have 15 years of public policy experience with the BC government, and that's where I gained a lot of my knowledge in the public policy area. As a public relations officer, I had the opportunity to work with a lot of organizations, and I also serve on the Richmond Community Foundation board as the vice chair. And there is recently, with the pandemic and the virus and the spread of the virus, we had the opportunity with the foundation to work with organizations and distribute money to them, and a tremendous amount of work is being done within Richmond by these organizations. But I did see a lot of gaps, and the necessary support that is needed to provide community residents with the certain services. There are gaps there, and that ultimately was a lot of my work that I did with the public service as well, is fostering relationships between organizations, community, and making sure we can tackle emerging issues and put people in touch with the services they need. So that's a lot of work that I've done in the past, and I think for me, I've been a strong advocate for issues around housing and affordability. I see it in the classroom. I see students with anxiety levels that are high because not knowing what's in store for the future.
Sure.
And those are some of the key reasons that I've come forward, and I think I have some good ideas I'd like to put forward and present, and what better place to do that than being in Parliament and having the ability to make those necessary changes and improvements in the way we do things for our residents.
Yeah, you talked about your experience and your background and seeing things on the front line and getting a view of what maybe is not there and what's needed. Let's move into that then. You're seeing that. Talk a bit about what you feel is most important and most in need of attention in your riding and in Richmond in general.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, affordability is a big one, right? Housing, and I'm excited about the Liberal platform because one of the key platform items that we've introduced is housing for everyone. And if we look back at some of the ideas I've talked about previously within our municipality with gentle density and other things, there's a missing middle, a number of options that aren't available to people, young professionals, people starting a family. So that's a big one for us here. I see it at the doorstep as well, or hear it at the doorstep. Another one is when I talk to my students in the classroom, anxiety levels, and this is something I saw when I was doing my work with the Richmond Community Foundation, mental health. Timely mental health support is not there. So when I say timely, you're looking at support workers not maybe being matched up with somebody in a timely manner. You might get one support worker at this one time.
Yeah.
You'd have to wait 2 months and get somebody totally different, and you're
no history there, doesn't it?
Yeah, there's no history, and how are you really improving your mental health? And students and young people, they are open to share, but not all are, right? So I think there's a lot of support that's needed there. They are our future leaders. And I think that if we can provide them the necessary support, we'll all be better off as we move forward together.
He's Parm Bains. He's running Liberal candidate in the Steveston Richmond East riding. Parm, we know it's a busy time from all of you guys right now, so we appreciate you taking the time to come in and talk to us here at the Richmond Sentinel.
Thank you very much for this opportunity.
You're quite welcome. Our next candidate to join us now is Jack TROVATO. He is the representative for the NDP in the Steveston Richmond East riding. Jack, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're quite welcome, sir. Okay, let's jump right in. Same questions for everybody as we've been announcing. Let's start with an introduction for our viewers as to who you are.
Sure. My name is Jack TROVATO, and I'm very proud to be representing the NDP here for Steveston Richmond East. I'm a teacher.
Okay.
And I'm also a community advocate. And some of you, your viewers may know some of the work that I've done over recent years. So one of the things that I did was spearhead the petition calling for the restriction of house size on the agricultural land reserve.
Okay.
So that's one of the major issues that was very important to our community a few years back. I also launched a petition calling for adequate funding for the replacement of the acute care tower at Richmond Hospital. And that was motivated, I have to tell you,
Sure.
from taking my father to emergency a few years ago. He was 85 years old, and we waited for 12 hours.
Wow.
And I thought, we need to do better. So that was the impetus to start that petition. And luckily, the provincial government recently announced that the funding is going forward, and there is now a commitment to shovels in the ground, and that's going to be built for the betterment of our entire community. And then the last thing that I petitioned for was calling on the provincial government to launch a public inquiry into money laundering, drug trafficking, and profiteering in our real estate economy. Huge implications, not only for our city here in Richmond,
Sure.
but also provincially and also nationally. So I'm committed to advocating on behalf of the constituents of Steveston and Richmond East for a better, fairer, greener, and more, shall we say, more just society.
Certainly.
That looks towards taking care of working Canadians, and that is based on a hopeful vision for a better tomorrow. And I plan on doing that by challenging the status quo, because clearly it hasn't been working for a very long time. So challenging the status quo on our social, economic, and political policies, and by enacting new ones that serve the common good of all Canadians. And the NDP and Jagmeet Singh, over the last 18 months during the height of the pandemic, have done a wonderful job in terms of advocating on behalf of all Canadians. And I'll be very happy to work alongside Jagmeet Singh and the NDP so that we can invest in things like healthcare, affordable housing, taking the profit out of long-term care,
Right.
and creating green infrastructure, while at the same time creating good jobs for Canadians that will address the climate change and the climate crisis that we're in right now. I do believe that together we can ensure that there's a just transition as we recover from the pandemic.
Talking a bit about yourself and some of the things you've spearheaded kind of leads me into another question, which, although you've mentioned a number of items that do need attention,
Yes.
Can you talk about other things in Richmond that you feel the MP representing your riding must attend to, and the party they represent must attend to?
Right. Affordability, especially affordable housing. There is a lack of rental, non-market, and co-op housing. In fact, the last co-op in Richmond was built about 30 years ago.
Wow.
So, we've been complaining about affordability for a very, very long time. It's not a new phenomenon.
Right.
And it affects my family as well. My daughter got married 2 years ago to a lovely gentleman from New Zealand.
Yeah.
I don't understand what he says to me half the time, but he's lovely nonetheless.
Yeah.
And, I have to tell you that they also had that critical decision of, what do we do, Dad? Do we stay here in Canada where she was born and raised?
Right.
Or do they move to New Zealand where they could actually afford to buy a house? It was a very difficult decision.
Sure.
They chose to move to New Zealand. And I can tell you that they bought a house, a modest house, but a house nonetheless that a family could grow into.
Certainly.
For $350,000. What on earth can you buy here for $350,000?
Not much.
if anything at all.
Anything, yeah.
So affordability is something that is critical, I think, to the residents of Richmond, but also Metro Vancouver and right across the country. So Jagmeet Singh and the NDP have committed to creating 500,000 affordable housing units across the country, with half of them being built within about 5 years. In the meantime, because it's going to take time,
Certainly.
what do we do in terms of offering assistance to those people that are struggling to rent? So Jagmeet, his plan is to offer a $5,000 subsidy, yearly subsidy, to those low-income renters until there's enough of a supply built that we can then transition those folks into affordable housing units.
Hey, this is great stuff. I thank you, and we're thanking everybody for taking the time today. I know it's getting down to the wire. Season's getting busy, so we appreciate you coming in. It's Jack TROVATO. He's the representative running for the NDP in Steveston, Richmond East riding. Jack, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Our next candidate in the Steveston, Richmond East riding is Francois RAUNET. And you're with the Green Party. Thank you for joining us.
Yes, I am. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
You're quite welcome. We are asking the same three questions of everybody today, just to get the viewers insight as to who you are. Let's start with some background on yourself, an introduction, and we'll take the questions after that.
Okay, sure, no problem. Well, my name, as you mentioned, my name is Françoise RAUNET, or Francoise RAUNET. 如果你说中文，大家好，我叫方世华。I grew up in Vancouver. I was lucky enough to have a very politically active household as a child. So I attended a lot of protest rallies and a lot of, other kind of advocacy events in my childhood. And the thing that I find really frustrating is that, the things that my parents were taking me out protesting for in the 80s are the same issues that we're dealing with today. And I'm just so frustrated after 40 years of advocating for, first it was peace, right? Peace march, anti-war stuff. It was solidarity marches and workers' rights and human rights. And then in my first anti-fossil fuel protest was in 1989.
89.
And, it just gets increasingly frustrating to feel like, we're not making any progress on the things that matter the most to me and to my family. I'm a teacher, I'm a mom. I care passionately about the future that we're leaving to the next generation. And really that's what pushed me to get into politics, was just that feeling of like government is not doing what needs to be done. I don't actually care what party implements the policies as long as the policies get implemented. Right? We need to deal with very complicated issues, and unfortunately our current elected leaders aren't doing it. And so for me, running in Steveston, Richmond East, this time around I'm actually running a nil expenses campaign, which means that I won't be spending any money at all on lawn signs or anything like that. So if you see my signs out in the community, you'll see that they're recycled from the last election when I ran in Richmond Centre in 2019. And the reason for that is because I just really want to make sure that the voters have an option on the ballot, right? I think that especially in a riding like Richmond East that tends to swing between conservative and liberal and conservative and liberal, and we've seen the same two parties representing the riding for the past few decades. I think that voters really need to have a choice to vote for a very clear set of policies and a different kind of direction for our global economy. Because the fact is, our economy is fundamentally flawed. And I can talk about it a bit more.
It's your time, please. Please do.
Basically, what it comes down to me is that the whole economy and this premise that it's based on GDP growth and consumption and always increasing the amount of growth and increasing profit, and it basically is consuming the resources of the planet far too quickly, at a completely unsustainable rate, for the benefit of a very, very, very few people. And the people who are benefiting has actually shrunk since the 1970s and 80s. Like, I remember when I was a kid growing up, there were a lot of jobs in resources in BC. There were a lot of jobs in the resource sector. And unfortunately, government decisions over the last few decades have led to a lot more, jobs being exported offshore. We're not doing any value-added manufacturing of our forestry products anymore. We're cutting down raw logs and sending them to China to be milled and then buying them back, for example. Right? We need to rethink our economy, and we need to keep our money local as much as possible. And we need government to stop working for the biggest industries on the planet, the billionaires and the millionaires and the multi-millionaires that are out there, and really start putting that money back into our local communities. So I am running to give people an option so that when they go to the ballot box, they know that if they put a tick beside my name, they're going to be telling whoever it is that wins Richmond East Steveston that they are voting for environmental protection. They are voting for a new local economy where the focus is on keeping the wealth in our local communities and not sending it to boardrooms overseas. And also for housing. That's another huge issue for me. I live in a co-op. I'm very, very lucky. I grew up in a co-op too. And we just don't have enough of it. You know, government stopped funding public housing and co-ops and social housing in the 90s, and in the last decade we've had a bit of a reinvestment, but it needs to be scaled up like 10 times, right? The number of people in our communities that can't pay rent, you know, that people are moving further and further away. The people I went to high school with, I think probably, you know, less than a quarter of them are still living in the greater Vancouver area. Most of them have moved to either other parts of Canada, other parts of BC, and even other countries.
Right.
So we have a lot of really serious and really urgent needs. And unfortunately, what we see from our politicians is a lot of finger pointing. And they all, in the campaign period, they'll all stand here and I'm sure they'll say, I believe in housing. I believe in funding a good healthcare system. I believe, you know, of course they do. We all do. These are our values. And yet we never make progress on them. Despite the fact that we all supposedly have the same stated goal, we never make progress. And why not? Because they're too busy picking at each other's flaws and not working together to get the job done. And that's what I want to do. I think if I go to Ottawa, I will be the force that will bring everybody together like I do in the classroom.
Well, I tell you what, you have answered all your questions, which is admirable.
Well, all right.
You've told us in the few seconds we have left, I mean, as you said, our last question, of course, is the issues that are most important to you, specifically about Richmond and your riding, but you have answered those as well. If there's any last words you have, the floor is yours still.
I don't know if everybody is aware, but there is an LNG plant on Tilbury Island in the south arm of the Fraser River. That is currently seeking an expansion. So that would be a huge increase of freighter traffic. It would be an added risk of explosion and pollution and everything for the people in our riding. So I think that's something definitely that's on the radar, that whoever does wind up representing Richmond East when they go to Ottawa, this is something they're going to have to deal with because that petition is before the federal government right now. So I encourage all elected leaders to work for the people and not for multinational corporations.
Thank you very much. She is the Green Party candidate for Steveston, Richmond East. It's Francoise Raunet. I hope I'm doing well with your last name. Was that?
Raunet is good.
Raunet,
yes, it's
okay.
Francoise. Yeah.
Okay, Francoise.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you. Nice to meet you.
Well, we're back here to wrap things up where we started, here at the Richmond Sentinel offices in the studio. I've enjoyed talking to the candidates as they want to make their way to Ottawa to represent you, the citizens of Richmond. We hope this has been a valuable tool for you to understand who they are and what's important to them. Don't forget, more information on the election and everything else that's Richmond in terms of news and stories, richmondsentinel.ca. Thank you for joining us. Thanks to Takuya, thanks to Florence, and thank you again for watching. I'm Jim Gordon.